2.0.
Yep.
Our second episode of the day. So, resident political scientist, also another one of the many guests that come on this show is a longtime jiu-jitsu practitioner, Chris Housenick. You would be the 54th episode of Life Unraveled, I believe. We did a Music Unraveled and 2 after the shows in the last couple of days, and I got another Life Unraveled guest coming in here in a bit. Yep. But well, what's new, man? You kind of had some specifics that you wanted to riff on today. So,
yeah, we've been talking about, I teach political science, politics. Politics is about rules, establishing rules.
People don't like rules. I've been talking about that a lot. What do you think about that idea?
Well, yeah, they don't, but I think the rules are made to be interpreted.
Yes, that's a better way to say it than broken.
No, but rules shape people's behaviors. And the trouble is, like, people say, well, this rule is fair, this rule is unfair. For most rules, there's no actual such thing. Yeah. It's the interaction between rules and people's behaviors. You set up the rules, and then people...
Do you teach a class like political behavior? Is that something you were just telling me about?
I touch on it. I teach comparative government, where you take all the things you do in American government and you reapply them to the other countries of the world. How do interest groups operate in China? How does economic policy work in Japan?
I'm very Model UN-ish.
Yeah, but it gives you, because, things that we assume, etc., don't always work, like many of the forces will be in countries that you wouldn't expect, but they operate in a wildly different way, like media in a authoritarian country. Is there media in North Korea? Yeah, but, the state owns it all and, creates its message. But I was thinking about this because we're getting into election season.
Yeah.
And elections have rules. And people, every election, novel prediction about November 5th or 6th of 2020, whoever wins and whoever loses, the losing side will want to get rid of the Electoral College system.
That's becoming such a more prominent thing that's in discussion, right? Is people being critical of that process?
Yeah.
I've been hearing about it more and more the last couple of elections, and then I've heard about just like recharting, like what I know about political history. I don't know if that's always been something people complain about, but
it complains when the majority of voters vote for somebody else. And this has happened in history before. Al Gore is the one that comes back. Al Gore beats W nationwide by, I think it was about 300,000 or 400,000 votes. It wasn't, of 130 million voters, it wasn't a huge number. But more people voted for him. He loses the Electoral College. 2016 got people thinking about it because Hillary Clinton got to new levels of irrelevance. She beat, President Trump popular vote by close to 3 million. Because she ran up the score in places like California.
Yeah.
But she still only gets the same number of Electoral College votes.
Mm-hmm.
And people, there's places where they mess with this. 538's this website. I think it's owned nominally by Disney. I guess it is actually owned by, it was part of ABC, ESPN. So they may be owned, 538 Political Forecasting is also owned by Star Wars. But the guy, Nate Silver's his name. He is a data nerd. But he is also he's the one who predicted the outcome the most. They mess with models of this. It's like, how far, in what circumstance could you manipulate, how big of a gap can you mathematically win the popular vote but still lose the Electoral College? And I think you can get to a point where you may be able to manage to lose by 15 to 20 million votes. But part of it is, okay, so we go to the national popular vote. Well, people aren't just automatically going to campaign the same. They're going to go, okay, new rules, new approach. The one thing the Electoral College does is it actually pushes down voter turnout. It actually pushes it down in California. It pushes it down in Arkansas. But it's a rule set.
Why do you think it pushes it down? Just because people don't think that the popular vote matters as much because that system exists?
All right. I want you to assume, let's say it's Bernie Sanders. You're feeling the burn. You're going to vote Bernie, and you're in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. What's the odds that Bernie wins Arkansas?
Pretty damn low, man.
Yeah.
We got a big drain the swamp sign right out here on I-40.
Yeah. But you got... Yeah. So, but that works. Here's the thing. So as a Bernie supporter, you're not going to the polls because, wow, I need to find 300,000 or 400,000 of my closest friends. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But here's the trouble. Let's say you are full Make America Great Again. You got the hat. You're the one who put the billboard up you mentioned. You're pretty certain President Trump's going to win Arkansas. So either way, you're staying home.
Yeah. True that. That's such a growing perception is that your vote doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you can point to probably at least 30 U.S. states where that's the case. The South, except for me, I think Georgia's starting to crack loose a little bit.
Would you call that like voter sectionalism?
Yeah. You have some state, like they talk about red states, blue states, and purple states. Some states are just so deep red and so deep blue, like Trump will not spend a single dollar in California. He's going to lose in monumental ways. So, and, what happens is because of the Electoral College vote, you compete in the 15 or 20 states where you might actually be able to win. This is those, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, Florida, North Carolina. In those states, that's where you campaign. That's where you spend your money. That's where you do all the fighting, stuff like that. If you you change the rules. So you get rid of the Electoral College, nationwide popular vote. That's when you would have every vote, every place matters. So it doesn't matter, basically if you want to win the election, you got to get more people in a dozen states. If you're the Democrat, you got to push back where Trump won in that Rust Belt. I hate the term, but we'll stick with what everybody's using.
Why is it called that?
Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, you're the historian. That was the industrial heartland of the U.S.
Oh, yeah, that's what I figured, yeah.
The big steel mills of a century ago. But they've been gone. And a lot of those places have modernized. Michigan's still hit pretty hard by it. The auto industry moving south.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But if you're running with the Electoral College, you're running really hard at 15 states, and that's it. Once you, if it's a full nationwide vote, every vote, doesn't matter where it is, you're going to go find it. You get somebody from, Mountain Home. That one vote from Mountain Home is just as important as that one vote from California.
So are you an advocate for this? Or do you think this is just kind of something that may happen, or is it just something that's being talked about?
It's a common complaint. Every time, I think the trouble is the last two times it's happened, it's because the Democrat has lost. So you hear the Democratic Party say it a lot. But it's a thing. You change the rules and people adapt to it. Like the example, if we were using in Jiu-Jitsu, you had this big super fight a couple of weeks ago. Gordon Ryan agrees to fight this big wrestling guy, and he says, okay, side rules. We're going to have the super fight, no pulling guard, and no leg locks. Gordon Ryan, I think it's taken down a couple of times, but he eventually, takes ownership and wins. So what happened? Well, Gordon Ryan's a smart dude. He goes, okay, here's the rule set. My camp's going to be different. I will bet you that Gordon Ryan, if he spends a third of his camps usually doing, takedowns and a third everything else and a third leg locks, he probably went, I'm going to do 70% of my, this is a wrestler, I'm doing 70% of my camp takedowns and my usual 30% everything else. It changed his behavior, and you probably got to the same outcome anyway.
Yeah, and it's a different strategy, but it's still within the same realm.
Yeah, I think it would, if it were a nationwide popular vote, it would bring more people to vote for presidents. You wouldn't get this.
Which is important. We want that. We want, like, I've been just thinking and talking more about civic duty.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and how important that is, and how, for the reasons we're discussing, it is often not exercised by so many people.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've been talking, 2019, as it winds away, was the year of the casino in Russellville and Pope County. We've got elected officials who are making multi-million-dollar, decade-long decisions. But if you look at how many votes county judges get, how many votes the Russellville mayor gets, I want to say a typical Russellville mayor election, you're only getting maybe 20% of eligible voters to go out to actually...
Yeah, it's super low.
Yeah.
It's like graduation rates at college.
Yeah, but it's like...
way lower than you think it would be for people.
Oh, yeah. But it's like... this person is going, at this moment in time is making big decisions that are going to affect everybody, for better or for worse, for the next 2 or 3 decades. And the majority of people are sitting at home, shrugging their shoulders or not engaging
and getting mad just the same.
Oh, yeah.
Getting frustrated, getting sucked into. It's like why I go to St. Mary's when I'm seeing these Netflix commercials we were talking about earlier, but it's like Fox News and CNN side by side. And it's just like, that's why I love the audiobooks and stuff, because I just go there and I try not to really look at it. But it's just, it's like it's in your face on every TV, and they have TVs in like every room down there. So
oh, yeah.
Like, oh, man. But
they don't put ESPN on them?
Yeah, no. One of the TVs upstairs does have like ESPN as well, but
that's where you go work out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, do you think there was any? I've heard this on both sides: the Russian collusion, as well as that Hillary Clinton had done like vote tampering in different ways. Not saying I'm not pushing any of those theories, but I heard like Alex Jones.
Oh, God.
Was pushing, and he did on Joe Rogan's podcast, but he was pushing the idea that these electronic voting machines that Hillary's campaign had hacked into them. And then you have the Russian collusion thing on the Trump side. But it's just like, talk about eroding faith in the process. It's like, oh, man. Do you think any of that actually went
on? I think at least the actions and intent went on.
On both sides?
For the general election, I'm not sure. For the primaries, one of the things that came out, and it is clear the Democratic Party did not like Bernie's candidacy.
Yeah.
And the degree of which they undermined it, there's enough that they probably, they did not play a neutral party in that race. I think that's a good way to put it. They definitely played favorites. They shared information. Bernie Sanders still came pretty close to defeating one of the big political machines of our era.
He did.
So there's the questions on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, okay, there's a general election, but it was at least at a minimum the Russian intent for Trump to win.
Where is that source? Where do you see that?
The social media bots.
Yes.
Flooding Twitter and Facebook with fake followers and spreading misinformation.
Troll farms.
Yeah. But here's the trouble I keep running into. That is what we know. That's a symptom. We know what they did, the why. That's where I'm not as... Part of it is like, people have always said, well, Trump might be easier to manipulate or this, that, or the other thing. But also, it may just be personal. Like, I've read, Vladimir Putin hates Hillary Clinton. Because when she was Secretary of State. Yeah, there was a lot of time. He's, when you talk about sort of toxic masculinity, he's pretty high up on that possibility.
The dude rides a bear across the river, man.
Yeah.
And he's a judo black belt.
Yeah, I know. But there's lots of stories where, the U.S. and Russia were not getting along, and it was Hillary Clinton who was the one who was telling, Vladimir, we're going to oppose you, we're going to stop you, that sort of thing. So, that becomes this weird, it is. I don't think you can argue that the Russians had intentions to influence the election. Here's the problem at all, how much influence did they have?
Yeah, you think they were just trying to F with our process. They didn't really care who did what.
Like you brought up one of the key concepts. I wish, if you want a course we really need, is political psychology.
That'd be interesting.
Because
who would teach that? Like a political scientist or a psychologist?
Probably it would lean more psychology, be a subset of their universe. But because part of it is for government to work, you have to have faith. You have to trust. And one of the trouble you're running into is a lot of institutions don't have a lot of that going around right now.
Yeah, for real.
And basically a lot of what Russia's doing, and they've done part of the reason I believe what Russia intended, they've been caught doing it in a lot of foreign countries. France caught them like red-handed, like 2 or 3 weeks before a presidential election.
Oh, and that too, they have been a little open about it. Like I remember listening to this interview and people were like asking Putin, like, why are you doing this? And he's like, don't act like you guys don't do it too. Oh yeah, that was his response. He's like, we're doing it because you guys are doing it. Yeah, like everybody's doing it. This is the world.
The U.S. CIA got involved in European elections in the late 40s and early 50s. We actively. I think it was the Italian Communist Party looked like it was gonna win in the early 50s. Like, no, we're fixing that election.
Man, that's one. Those sort of things end up being power vacuums, regime change wars. Man, has there been an attempt at installing democracy by a Western nation in either an underdeveloped or a previously developed country that worked long term?
In contemporary eras?
Yes.
That we
not necessarily. Just a Western. Because I can't think
that
of it,
that the West put in place. No, some have gone that way themselves. I'm thinking the big ones, the spread of democratic idealists. They always point to Germany and Japan. Well, they're also pretty industrialized, educated. Japan's 2 decades of war and Japan's 2 world wars. Kind of self-enlightenment there. I'm thinking some of the East. I'm trying to think about how I would categorize some of the East Asian states, South Korea, but Vietnam's still pretty far behind. South Korea has been pretty democratic for maybe 20 or 30 years. It's but they maybe. They were propped up by the U.S.
Yeah. Well, so that being the theme shared by pretty much. That whole region was a military dictatorship for a minute under MacArthur, after the
Korean War.
After World War II, really.
Yeah. Well, Korea, Korea was split into zones.
Was it Korea over in 53? Was that when?
Yes.
Okay.
But spreading, that's always one of the things I teach is a lot of things people want, the penicillin of world politics. How do I fix terrorism? How do I fix weapons of mass destruction? How do I fix economic development? How do I spread democracy? They want one answer to 200 plus countries, and there's never been and probably never will be such a solution.
Yeah,
everything's got local issues.
I agree. Culture, nationalism, all of these things play such a big factor.
I was a good one if you want to really get into current Japanese political culture. It's a very different. I think it'd be very hard for Americans to understand. It's so completely different from where we're at now.
In what ways?
It's very cooperative. If there are disagreements, they are absolutely, positively not in public.
But they throw each other with Tomonogi.
Yeah,
that too, right?
I know.
Remember that video? The dude's just they get into it on their parliament floor or whatever it is, and he's like, "Dude, I'm just about to Tomonogi your ass."
There's, I think Foreign Policy I don't know when I shared it, but there's Foreign Policy magazine had a gallery pictures of the 10 most unruly parliaments. And that was on there. That was kind of tame. People There was one in, I think, Southeast Asia. It might have been Taiwan or somebody pulled basically there was a protest. They barricaded the doors to like the parliament. Somebody brought a chainsaw to parliament and started chainsawing doors down.
Wow. Dude,
the one to always watch, Russian and Ukrainian parliaments. There is so much, basically imagine 600 males, a whole lot of vodka. Yeah, there's some serious fist fights and just beat downs.
Wow.
Well, I joke about it. The old boxer, the heavyweight Vladimir Klitschko, I think he's mayor of Kiev. And it's like, what a perfect, that's exactly who you need, you know, as a professional politician and such.
Somebody that won't, like...
Here's a real beat down.
Yeah, like you won't say disrespectful shit to him, too. Like Danielle was talking about that when she was on, about people just like being rude as all get out.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's just like, like so many people talk to women that way. Mm-hmm. And B, people are just like, when it comes to these types of issues, are a lot more, you know, whether it's a political issue or has to do with your business or anything like that.
Yep.
What are you thinking about the 2020 election? What's going to be different? What are some of your thoughts?
I'm just bracing to start getting into it. I took fall of 2019. I didn't do a lot into it because part of it is, we all know, you know, President Trump is the Republican nominee. Easy enough. There were so many Democrats. I didn't want to waste my time.
Oh, yeah.
There was like, you know, when you're having two debates and you've got, I think, 15 or 16 people running, I'm like, do I really...
What are we down to now?
I want to say you're on your fingers. I want to say you got 8 or 9.
Which, is Tulsi still in?
I think so.
Tulsi. So I think she's going to team up with somebody. Then you got Yang.
I could
then
see
you got
that.
Warren. And then you've got Bernie and Joe Biden.
Yep.
Right? Is Joe Biden weird?
Yeah. But I'll also forget, there's 2 others. Julian Castro.
He has an unfortunate last name to be running for American political spots.
but he's Hispanic out of Texas. He did a couple of terms in Congress, but he was in the Obama administration.
I do remember.
Cory Booker's a senator out of New Jersey, African American fellow. But they're all in the same boat like Tulsi is. Like, they're stuck in that permanent 1%.
Yeah, but they could be potential VP candidates.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it crazy how when Hillary was running, I never knew who her VP was?
I think I still make fun of her when I explain in my elections lecture. In American history, there's vice presidents are chosen. They're not elected, but you choose them for tactical reasons. The Republicans have had chosen vice presidents the last couple of cycles to shore up their own party support, particularly either Tea Party or evangelicals. But when I look at, Tim Kaine was his name, senator from Virginia. When Hillary picked him, it's like, I'm still like, what the, huh?
Yeah, I didn't even know who it was.
It's like, what do you bring to the table?
I didn't see his name on any of her signs.
Oh, no.
I literally went into that election not knowing who was on the ticket with her. No clue. And I looked it up, and I think you told me about it because we had this conversation, because that wasn't how she was campaigning. There was no big announcement about who her VP was going to be that I was charting. And that's something I guarantee you, when if say Bernie wins the primary or whatever, that he will be, I'm teaming up with Tulsi, or I'm teaming up with somebody, and that'll be a big announcement, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you see getting the bid for the Democratic Party out of these ones that we just mentioned? I mean, it's going to be one of those 5. It's not. I don't think it's going to be Tulsi. I think it's going to come down to Biden and Bernie. Yeah. And then I could see Warren or Yang or Tulsi being a VP on either one of their tickets.
Yeah. Don't forget Buttigieg. I have a feeling there's a sort of a weird phenomenon. A lot of the people who win the Iowa caucuses don't win the nomination. Because he's from, and this is for both parties, because he's from the Midwest and he's a lot more local to Iowa. I could see Buttigieg winning the Iowa caucuses, gives him a bump, but it doesn't get him to the nomination. It's going to be get comfortable. It's going to be a long debate. I would not be surprised if it's not decided by like they go into a contested Democratic convention.
Could the party split?
I don't.
That hasn't happened since the Civil War, has it?
No, but
remember when Stephen Douglas and they split the Democratic Party along sectional lines over the issue of popular sovereignty? That was one of the things that got us in the Civil War. At
least who is thrown into the pool? I don't think so. And don't forget Michael Bloomberg. He jumped. God help us all. But I don't think the trouble is the party. There's not enough separate, distinct, effective blocks of the party. If there were more space, but if there were a lot of bigger differences between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, if Bernie Sanders was really even more, socialistic, like he's, yes, we're going to nationalize healthcare, we're going to nationalize these companies, that sort of stuff. Maybe. I don't think there's enough. You need ideological space, and you need everybody needs to see it. I don't think there's enough room yet. I think the biggest problem, the way the Democratic Party is set up, again, going back to the electoral, the party nominations work on the exact same system Electoral College does. You compete in state events. You get so many votes from each state, and they pick the party's nominee. The Democratic Party uses proportional representation. So you run in Arkansas, you get 20% of the popular vote. In Arkansas, you get whatever 20% of those nominees will be. So if you may wind up with 4 or 5 people, nobody gets to 50%. You could start mapping it out. Okay, let's see. Joe Biden gets 40%. Bernie Sanders gets 35%. So, I got to do math now. Somebody else, let's say Yang gets 15%. Elizabeth Warren gets the last 10%. So you got 4 people. Nobody's got a majority. It's at the party convention. You figure out, okay, who gets to win? How do we make everybody happy?
Yeah.
It's the more people you have in the contest, the more likely that is.
Do you think that is going to be a big influence on, all of that uncertainty is going to swing things more Trump's way in the re-election?
I think Trump's basically sitting around waiting for the general election. I mean, and that's going to, basically imagine, you got one contest in November. You don't got to worry about this the first 6 months. You don't got to fundraise for it. And the issue I see is nobody's fixing the problems of 2016. Yeah. Or nobody on top is fixing the problems of 2016.
Still being debated. Just a lot of talking.
Well, why did Hillary Clinton lose? And the easiest, fastest answer is very simple. She did not rally minority voters who are they're a major part of the Democratic Party. She could not in any way, shape, or form rally minorities the way Barack Obama did.
Or minorities, young people.
Yeah, well, minorities in particular.
African Americans.
He trounced everybody. His elections were no doubters. And part of it was he was able to rally, African American voters and Hispanic voters, like no Democrat before. And in 2016, not Hillary Clinton. Those areas, they stayed. Here's the trouble: they didn't vote Republican. They stayed at home. Mm-hmm. So imagine, you're a politician, you're running, and 10% of your party. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're running for president, and 10% of your party sits on the couch at home, you're done. Yeah. I don't care how Ronald Reagan himself could come back from the grave. If 10% of the Republicans now stay at home, he is not getting elected. But here's the trouble I'm starting to run into. I'm looking. You brought him up: Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. Who's rallying the Hispanic vote? Who's rallying the African American vote? The answer is none of the top tier candidates are.
Yeah.
So they're walking right, unless they've got some magical plan in place. I've seen a lot of the same stuff. And we're going to start to find out about this when you get into the early primaries, when you see who votes, because that was part of the. Basically, you saw in the primaries when it was Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders, African Americans weren't showing up for the primaries. They weren't choosing between those two. You see this with Hispanic Americans, and that's the thing I look for as a political scientist. We saw what happened in the general election of 2016. But if you look back, you started to see that in January and February and March of 2016. Major parts of the Democratic Party decided to stay home in the primaries, and nobody fixed it, did anything about it, changed outreach, etc. And those are the areas that cost Hillary those 6 or 7 states that lost her the election. You're basically telling 30 or 40% of the country, I'm not going to try and get you to the votes. I'm not going to try and get you out. That is electorally fatal.
Yeah. What do you think about impeachments? How is this going to play out? Is this, a lot of people are liking to say this is just a tool to try and shore up the Democratic Party getting elected because to more things to discredit Trump. I've been hearing all these conspiracies about it. Was the impeachment justified? What are your predictions? Is it going to affect his re-election? Or is it going to affect him in the upcoming election?
Yes. Sorry.
I know that's a complex question, dude. I just wanted to poll you on what you thought about it.
Here is the 30-second way I always explain what's going on with impeachment. You've watched enough. Have you watched Law and Order?
I've seen almost every episode of SVS. Stopped about season 20 or 22.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Boom.
Yeah, but when you watch enough, I watched the original Law and Order when I was growing up and that sort of stuff. They always say it. Basically, you can get a pencil indicted by a grand jury to say there's enough for something to have an actual trial. The House impeaching anybody means there is enough evidence that we should have a trial to discuss this. That's what happened. This is what happened with Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky scandal. That he had acted in ways, wasn't truthful about it, lied to Congress. The House found that there was enough evidence that they should have a discussion about this, what had happened, etc. The Andrew Jackson case. That's what the House really is. The Senate's job is to actually hold that trial. Gather, have testimony, gather witnesses, provide the evidence. In
the Senate, it's a Republican majority, right?
Yes. So that was always. You could probably vote to impeach President Trump. You could have done it for the last 2 years. You always had the numeric numbers because the minute the Democrats take the House, Nancy Pelosi becomes, the third most, probably the second most powerful, and she could probably, it's like the one I always say is John Boehner's Republicans. He was the Republican Speaker of the House during President Obama's term. He voted to repeal Obamacare 50 times. They controlled the House. Not one, very few Democrats were for it, but it went nowhere. Why? Because at that point, Democrats still controlled the Senate. Mm-hmm. That didn't last. That was only 2 years. But Nancy Pelosi could have impeached President Trump, once a month, every month for 2 years. Chose not to.
Just trying to build more, or is this the first justifiable thing?
I think to her mind, and at least I think it's about evidence. A lot of what you're seeing, and I think the way I describe it, people don't get in trouble for crimes. They get in trouble for cover-ups. Mm-hmm. And when you start to hear about this person's hiding things, deleting files, how many times do we hear about Hillary Clinton's email servers?
Fortunately, not much lately.
But
man, yes, I know.
But yeah, so that was a 2016 version, and now we've got communications with a foreign country, talking the possibility about going after a current political rival. And then when you start to order people to lie, when you are the recording of said phone call is on a secret server, locked in the White House. there is. It doesn't. Let me put it away. At least it doesn't look good. But it's, the crime itself is one thing, but it's, if history's told us something, it's when people start covering their tracks. That's when the heavy real crimes start. I mean, that's what, Nixon's orders a break into the Watergate Hotel, and it's all the cover-ups and lies and firings, in the process.
Reagan got out ahead of things and apologized on national television for that incident that came up with him. Do you think that's what saved him?
He also had people who took the fall.
He did end up. He actually lied on national television.
Oliver North, was it Poindexter? I think. For those, this is the Iran-Contra affair.
Yes,
he had his National Security Council. Some of the advisors were actively running operations when they were supposed to be advising and coordinating. It violated congressional orders. Don't sell stuff to the Iranians when we're selling stuff to the Iranians. Funneling money, ignoring a whole bunch of congressional orders. I think you had people who effectively took the fall. You've got those people. I think many were either. I don't know if they were pardoned, furloughed, etc. later on. But there was accountability. People went to jail. But yeah, I think part of it was that, Reagan did try to get out in front of it. I think he realized he'd lost. There is some debate about how much Reagan knew during it, like at the moment. Yeah. Because presidents have different approaches. Reagan's was always a little more hands-off.
Versus, talking with everybody about everything all the time.
I was trying to. Nixon and Lyndon Johnson were both micromanager presidents. They were really down into the details and the little nitty gritty. Whereas Reagan was much more let the bureaucrats do their thing. So I know, like, when I've read about like Reagan and Iran-Contra, there's pretty considerable debate and discussion about how much he knew, when he knew it, that sort of thing. So, because it's you have different reactions and different thoughts about this. If he orders these guys to violate Congress, you have a very different interpretation. Well, they were operating behind his back. He should have known, or he should have had more control over these guys. It's still not right, but you have a different reaction to what and how a president should have deal with it. But it's not the digital age. It's not where you can, tens of thousands of emails and
which makes it so hard to sift through too. The time, I mean, yes, we have more access, but the time it takes, like, and the number of pages some of these documents are, and the number of emails, and like somebody broke down a stat, like you could get this many people reading these for this amount of time and compiling the information in this way, and it would still take this many months.
Oh yeah, I remember. I tell my students that when we get to, I forget, it's in one of my upper level classes, we talk about the Pentagon Papers. And we talk about, the leaking of those. They smuggled 7,000 pages of documents out. Mm-hmm. This whole classified diplomatic history of all the lies of the Vietnam era. This is 7,000, you'd say today, 7,000 pages is nothing today. But you go, this is 7,000 pages of the mimeograph and the copier machine era. That's a lot of paper. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of physical stuff you're trying to move. Whereas today, like, I remember the big WikiLeaks download was 270,000 emails. Oh my God. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the Pentagon Papers would take, 8 seconds today in today's era. But you're right. It's finding a way to comb through it all. You're doing keyword searches. Yeah. Let's Google search for, whatever word. How many times does the word Taiwan come up? Yeah. Going through them all.
Well, like the Mueller report, all that stuff. It's like the amount of people that we're going to have. It's like along the same lines of what you're talking about with the popular vote. It's like the number of people that are going to go read that is very, very low.
Oh, yeah.
And if the people read that, are they more likely or less likely to go vote?
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's the actual, here's the trouble is you have the actual, think of it like you have a criminal justice case of impeachment, and now that's done. You're going to have the criminal justice trial for removal from office. That's coming up here this spring. Those are events, but then there's also how they are manipulated for political advantage or disadvantage. President Trump is going to use the impeachment as a political weapon against the Democrats. Whoever the Democratic nominee is, he will say, novel prediction, that the Democratic Party means to destroy me. They will do anything. Vote for me if you vote. That sort of thing.
I've heard that so much, and I just refer to them as conspiracies. But if you're, let's say you're Joe Biden, or let me suck on your finger.
Yeah. If you're the candidate and you're going to say, look, the president's corrupt, the House found him guilty of crimes, the Senate chose not to remove him. The only way to get rid of him is to send me money and help me vote him out of office. So there's what actually transpires in all those.
Well, man, I haven't been. But I only see Bernie's shit. I don't see only Joe Biden stuff I see is bad. You know what I'm saying? It's like Joe Biden's down against marijuana. Joe Biden's sucking on his wife's finger during Joe Biden's got kids in the pool playing with his leg hair.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Joe Biden's touching kids.
There's a funny thing. Don't be in either party for a lot of times. Don't be a front runner. The front runner, a lot of times in elections, they become like this lightning rod. The best place to run is a lot of times you want to be in second place until February 1st. Because what happens, all the spotlights turn on the front runners. I do a lot of this. I talk about it in the Republicans. I'm trying to think. It might have been 2012 or no, 2016. You had a big field of Republicans. But the one thing you saw, and a lot of it in 2015, was a lot of these front runners, all of a sudden a spotlight comes on them, and then all the warts come out. So it's like if you can run just behind it's like running a long distance race. We're going to run a marathon. I'm going to draft the front runner for 22 miles, and then they're going to fade. I'm going to still be fresh. I'll pass them and finish and win easily.
Yeah.
But you saw this. I'm trying to think of all the people. Oh, Rick Perry is one. He was the energy secretary. He's out of Texas, former governor. He's wound up at the front of the pack once in a while. He's not good enough on a national stage to stay there. Herman Cain, the Godfather's Pizza guy, the African-American out of Georgia. He got to the front, and then, by the way, he's had affairs and all this sort of stuff, things like that. You saw a lot of this, people coming, pulling out of the pack, and then the candidacy falls apart and somebody steps through. So, yeah, let me put it this way: if I am Bernie Sanders, I'm running a nice, good second place, solid second place behind Joe. I think that's for right now. That's maybe where I want to be.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the weirdness. He had to do. I just caught the headlines. That's as far as It's Christmas vacation. I checked some headlines. It's rare I dig deep.
It's been a weird time.
But he's walking back something he said yesterday. It's like Joe Biden just can't get out of his own way.
Yeah.
But if you're all these, and that's part of the problem. If Joe Biden would suddenly drop out, that Democratic field gets really interesting fast.
Yeah.
Because part of it is if some of these smaller candidates, like you brought up, if Tulsi would step out, or the two I brought up, that's only 1% of all the voters. It's not going to really change anything.
Yeah.
But if you're the front runner and you've got a third or 40% of all the Democrats who were supporting you have to make a new decision, that's a lot of that's where you may see somebody like a Tulsi could skyrocket. Yang could get into the top tier. Things like that. That's really the sort of thing that would shake up the field in a dramatic way. But it's going to be a long spring semester. Just because watching, I teach American government every semester. And really, once the semester begins, you're getting into votes. And so it's going to be every Thursday when we come into class. Tuesday's election day. So by Thursday, you'll know who won the Iowa caucuses, who's won in New Hampshire primaries, who's dropped out. This field is going to develop. I mean, you realize, 15 weeks and, even 5 minutes of class, you just burned an hour of your 30 that you meet.
Yeah.
And so,
man, we'll have to be thinking about some of those pivotal blips in the political spectrum, and we can do some more episodes on that.
I would say spring break, because that'll be really, mid to late March, because that'll be right after Super Tuesday. You've got the early primaries. Yeah, you go, this is not... So you go Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire primaries, I think South Carolina primaries next, and Nevada. Those 4 are always first. They're the first contests. Super Tuesday is a big one. I think they also call it the SEC primary. It's a lot of the South. Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, I think Georgia, etc. All those, good Southern football places.
Yeah. About
12 states. By then, those fields are going to drop for the Democrats. That's kind of been by design, but I think this year you'll be able to. The goal, my prediction is, by Super Tuesday you're going to be down to about 5. They still all may be very active, but that's where you're going to be. That's when you start getting a feel for what's going on.
Yeah.
By then, President Trump will be easily renominated, barring divine intervention.
Or impeachment, I guess, right?
No, that should be, we'll probably know what the hell's going on with that at least.
Yeah.
Had a trial, that sort of stuff. But, there's, you could do, so that's one clear one. I would say probably late May, you'll have, you'll know all the contests are over about like June 1st.
And you got debates.
The debates will be over, but that's when you'll know who the nominee is, what percentage of the votes they got, that sort of stuff. Of course, first weekend after the first Tuesday in November, how the election turned out.
Yeah.
So
we'll do them all. Yeah. Strange and interesting time to be alive. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. But man, I really appreciate you coming on and educating me and the listeners. It is nice to have like a resident guy.
Yeah.
That can comment on local, state, federal. So always thanks for coming on the show, man.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. That'll be it, guys. Got some other exciting episodes.
I know you got the missus on
this week. Yep, finally got things worked out with her. We've got a Rise of Skywalker review we're going to do before people on the podcast. It's coming Tuesday. But man, I've been doing so many podcasts over the break. I've had to start scattering them out and scheduling them. I'm putting all the audio up like pretty fast, but the videos I'm scheduling out on Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen the reminders starting to pop up.
Yep. So, but man, I have just like a couple other than the ones we did today left to edit, and I uploaded Danielle's while we were here and was doing a couple of things. So, but man, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll always look forward to having you back.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Signing off.